Hi guys, I'm Woodcraft Hamster and I thought I'd do another episode of my SE6 modification series. And today what I want to talk about is the edge. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to do a little bit of work on this. It's not a bad edge from the factory, so straight out of the box. I mean, as you can see, it cuts relatively well. It could be better, don't get me wrong, but you know, it's got a reasonable edge on it. And I'm sure that if I spent maybe 5 or 10 minutes with a strop, I could get this even sharper. But what I'd like to do, or what I am going to do, should I say, is I'm just going to give this a very, very light resharpen. I'm not necessarily going to reprofile this edge, but what I am going to do is just sharpen it more to sort of my liking, if you like, and it will ever so slightly change the grind on this, but not significantly. And what I'm going to use is a set of water stones, which is what I tend to use. There's nothing wrong with standard wet stones or diamond stones. I happen to have water stones and that's what I tend to use, so that's what I'm going to be using today. But let me move you guys a little bit closer in, and I'll show you exactly what it is we're going to do. Right then guys, so this is my sharpening stone. As I say, it's a Japanese water stone. It's been soaking in water for about 15-20 minutes now. You do need to get these nice and moist before you use them. And on the top edge here I've got a 250 grit, and underneath this sort of brown looking layer is 1000 grit. And it's quite useful if you are looking to buy one of these. Get yourself a double-sided stone because it just gives you more options. You know, you've got a coarser you know, grind for taking away more material for if you're reprofiling, or you've got some chips or some notches in your blade, and then you've got something to sort of smooth out on the bottom. I do have a couple more of these to go down to even finer grits, but for now I'm just going to start with this one. And what I tend to do is you take your blade, put it flat against the stone, and then roll it forwards until you get to the desired angle. Now I tend to do this kind of thing by hand. It's not quite as precise, but as long as you're comfortable that you can keep everything even, it's absolutely acceptable to do it this way. If you'd rather be a bit more precise, or you're a bit unsure about your own sharpening skills, you can either buy or make jigs for this that will keep the blade at a precise angle, so all you're having to do is sort of roll it forward and across in order to do your sharpening. Now I'm just going to start off, I'm not going to change this grind massively, but I'm going to sort of start off roughly about here. I couldn't even begin to tell you what angle this is in terms of degrees, but it's sort of roughly where I tend to gravitate towards. And again, all you want to do is just very smoothly, not so much gently, you can put a bit of pressure behind it, but what you want to do, keeping it even, is just roll, or sorry, push the knife forward. And what you're aiming to do, if you can maybe imagine this while you're doing it, is you want to try and almost slice a very thin layer off the top of this stone. Although you won't actually physically do it, I found it a really good sort of reference point to imagine that you're slicing you know, a very thin slice off the top of this stone. And what you can do periodically is just check the blade, and because we've got this kind of powder coating, sandblasted coating on here, you can tell as you're moving sort of past the original grind, if you like. And with a long knife like this, where it's quite a long blade, what you may need to do is just pay special attention to the tip. Now you can see here, hopefully, you've got this kind of layer of slurry that's come off the stone as I've been using it, and right at the very tip here there's no marks whatsoever, and it's because as I get to the end of this stone, the tip of the blade just misses the stone. And what you can do, and I usually do this kind of, it's just periodically now and again, is just do a little bit of work on that tip so you know that you're actually sharpening the tip as well as the rest of the blade. And there you can see that I'm now picking up the tip of the blade as well. And one other thing to remember with this, guys, is this is not a quick process, and it's certainly not a process you want to rush. And what you want to do is maybe 10 to 15 strokes on the one side, then reverse that blade over, keeping the same angle. And do the same thing on the other side. What I'm going to do, I'm going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes just working on this particular stone, and what I'll do, I'll come back, I'll show you what the edge is looking like once I finish on this stone. We'll then flip over and we'll move over to the 1000 grit. So there we go, guys. I'm now completely finished up with the 250 grit. I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick this up well enough, but we've got a nice even edge both sides of this blade now. And what I'm going to do is move over to this, which is the 1000 grit, and all that's really going to do is just going to start adding to the sharpness that we've already got on this. And what it will also do is start sort of smoothing off some of the rougher marks left by the 250 stone. So again, exactly the same procedure, and I'm not sure if you can hear that on the camera, guys, but moving over to this particular stone, because it's such a higher grit, there's a lot less resistance than with the 250 stone, and what it's essentially doing is, rather than removing large amounts of material, and take large with a pinch of salt, but what it's actually doing is more polishing the blade now. So we've got to the profile that we want, and what we're now doing is just refining that blade, getting rid of all of the rough marks, the burrs, polishing it down slightly, in essence making it sharper by removing all of the jagged bits. Now, I'm not going to go into any of the science of this. There's plenty of people on YouTube and the internet at large who can go into it in much more detail and a lot more accurately than I can. But just as an example, if you were to look at a freshly sharpened knife under a microscope, what it would actually look like is a saw edge. And by going through the various grades and grits, what you're doing is you're reducing down the size of those sort of saw edge pieces, if you like, to smaller and smaller sizes. So when you have a blade that's had a really good profile, a really good sharpen, and then it's been polished down to a mirror finish, I mean, to the naked eye, it looks absolutely perfect, but you get that under a microscope and there will be sort of microscopic saw teeth. And the general idea behind sharpening is the smaller you can make those jagged edges, the sharper and more efficiently your knife will cut. So again, guys, I'm just going to spend another 10 or 15 minutes on this particular stone. As you go further through the grits, my personal experience is it tends to take a little bit longer with each stone. You know, the 250 grit and the lower grit stones, because what you're doing is essentially rasping off material from your knife. You can do that fairly quickly, and again, take that with a pinch of salt. But as you get onto the higher grits, you need to spend more time in order to smooth out all of those marks, because what you don't want is to see grind marks in your blade, or I certainly don't. You know, I personally see that as a bad sharpening job. If you can see the marks from the lower grit sharpening stone, it just means you haven't taken the time or the care to sort of polish and buff those out. So I'm just going to carry on for a short while, guys. I'll cut back in a moment and we'll move on to the next steps. Okay, so we're now finished up with 1000 grit, and again, I'm not sure how good the macro on my camera is here, but again, we've just continued with that edge, nice and even all the way through, starting to look a lot smoother now. There's no real scratch marks from the 250 stone left. And what I'm going to move on to is this, and this is a 6000 grit stone, and this is more for sort of final polishing of this edge. Now it does come, if I just grab it out of my bucket of water here, it does come with a small stone here. There is a proper name for this which completely escapes me, but the idea is with this is that you literally build up a slurry on top of the stone, and what you can then do is use that stone kind of on your that slurry on your finger to polish your blade. Now, because the only part of this that it's possible to polish is the actual edge itself, I'm not going to bother with that today. But what this stone also does is it just allows you to kind of give a really nice, smooth, almost mirror finish to the edge. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now. And again, as with the stone before it, this is so much smoother. It's almost like running the edge across glass. It's that smooth. But also, I don't know if you can see it particularly well on the camera there. If I tilt this, maybe you might be able to see it. There are two black lines running along this stone, and because this is such a fine stone, what those lines are, it's actually the metal that's being ground off of this edge, just leaving a residue on this light coloured stone. And again, it's quite nice to see it on there because you know you're doing the job properly, because you can see the remnants of the metal coming up on there. So again, I'm going to spend 15-20 minutes, maybe a little bit less, just finishing off sort of the final honing of this edge. I'm then going to move over to a strop, which if you don't already own one and you're somebody that uses not just knives but any other sort of bladed tool, I highly recommend getting yourself a strop. I'll explain a bit more about that when we move over to it, but I personally, for edge tools, I think they're worth their weight in gold. Okay guys, so that is all of the honing and sharpening done. Hopefully, again, this is picking up well enough on the camera. Not only is the edge nice and even all the way through the blade on both sides, it is starting to take on that kind of mirror finish now. There are hardly any, if any, sort of tool marks in there now. And what I'm going to move over to is this, which is my strop. Now you may have seen this in my other videos, and as I said before, if you don't own one of these, buy one, or even better yet, make one. All you need is a piece of leather. You can use leather from most places. You can buy it, you can butcher an old jacket or an old sofa, and what you want to do is get a piece of wood, any kind of board will do, because you want this to be flat. Most people are familiar with sort of barber's strops, where you'll have a sort of a leather belt and you'll wipe your knife up and down it like this, and that's all well and good for convex blades like razors, things like that. However, if you do it with a knife like this, all you're going to do is roll the edge of the blade and make it less sharp than potentially it could be. It won't completely blunt the knife, but you will find that it won't be as sharp as it could be. So highly recommend one of these. What I've got here is a honing compound. This is Starky Blue, more commonly known as Smurf Poo for the slightly blue colour that it is. And all you want to do is just give your strop a really good coating of this compound. And what this does, this acts almost like a sharpening stone, and it will take a very small amount of metal off of your blade while you're honing it. So I mean, essentially that is what sharpening is. It is removing very small amounts of metal. As I said before, that the sort of the sawtooth effect, which if you're looking at this under a microscope, and this is just kind of a very fine version of one of those stones. And all you want to do is just take your edge. You want to make sure that you're when you put it on, that you've got your edge at the far end and you're dragging it backwards. What you don't want to do is, as you did with the stone, if you start trying to push forward with your blade on this, all you're going to do is cut into the leather and ruin your strop. So again, if you just take a look at this now, it's nice and fresh, and similar to the last stone, the 6000 stone that we used, what will happen as I drag this knife down, you'll notice that this starts to darken, and that is just particles of metal from the edge that are coming off as you're stropping. And again, sort of straight away here, hopefully you guys can see that we've now got a much more mirrored shine on this edge, and that's exactly what we want. What that will do is just improve the sharpness of this knife slightly. So I'm just trying to make sure you guys can see me here. And we've now got a real high mirror shine. I'm just going to do a little bit of work on the tip of the blade, because that is the part, as I said earlier, that can get missed because you're having to sort of curve the blade slightly as you're doing the sweep. So again, just to show you the tip there, we've also got that nice mirrored shine on there. And again, likewise, when you come to do the other side of the blade, just move this camera around a little bit. Slightly easier for me to work from this angle. So again, same thing, putting the blade away from itself. And what you want to try and do with your strop, guys, is try and keep it at the same angle that you've been sharpening the knife with, and that'll make it much easier, and it will prevent you from rolling the edge of the blade, which is something you really don't want to do. I've done it a couple of times in the past where I've been trying to sort of do things in haste, and what will happen is you'll end up rolling the edge, and you've got to go through, if not the whole process, certainly a good portion of it again, and it's just a waste of your time. And what you can do, if you find one edge of your strop is getting dirtier than the other, just flip it round, and then you can make use of any of that honing compound that you've not been getting at before. So again, there's a little way to go on this side. I won't bore you with the rest of this, but we have got that, certainly on the tip up here, we've got that nice mirrored shine. A little bit more work to do down the bottom of the blade, and what I'll do, I'll come back once that's done, and I'll show you the finished result. So there we go, guys, we're now completely done. I'll give you a little look at the edge as it is now. And it's a stark improvement from how this came out of the box from the factory. If I just grab that little piece of offcut again, just to give you the sort of the demonstration, if you like. It's now cutting a lot smoother, much finer shavings. And if I go down to the tip on the camera here, where are we? That's probably the best angle there. And you know, I can now take off really thin, fine shavings with the tip of this knife, which is brilliant for tinder making and for sort of fine detail carving work. But that is it, guys. Next episode of this series, we're going to look at the final finish of this blade. I still haven't decided if I'm going to leave it as is with this bead blasted finish, or potentially do something a little bit more sort of exciting, a little bit different with it, but I'll come back to you on the next episode and we'll make a decision. But I hope it was useful. Comments and questions in the box below. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I hope you'll all join me next time. Thanks, guys.